The word is the smallest part of a sentence that has a meaning. They can be divided into 9 parts that are considered the parts of speech. Words can be categorized by their function or their use. Now we're going to see how we can categorize each of them and how they can work to form a full sentence. One way we are going to make it easier to understand the parts of speech is by using the structure of a sandwich. This is based on how we make a sandwich. We usually have to do certain steps that will help us make the perfect sandwich. In this case, we're going to use these parts that are supposed to be the 9 parts of the parts of speech to identify each of them with one of the parts of speech, you can say. For example, one can be the bread, one can be the butter, one can be the meat, one can be the lettuce. It can all depend on how we're going to relate them to that. The first and easier part of speech to understand is the noun. The noun is the person, the thing, the place, the event, or the idea that it's doing an action. When it comes to nouns, we can categorize them in different ways. For example, the most known are to categorize the noun are by categorizing them if they are common or if they are proper. Common nouns are usually the ones that do not specify a place, a name, or something in specific. For example, you're just using the generic name that it has. For example, to use a generic name, you can say a car, a TV show, maybe a chair, a pizza place, or even just a door, a house. The point of it is that it's not specifying something specifically, it's just the generic name of that thing. The other part is the proper nouns. The proper nouns are the ones that do specify the name or what it's talking about. For example, some proper nouns are your given name. When you use the name on a person, we have to use a specific proper noun so that we can identify them as such. These are the ones that usually use official names. It can be the name of a person, maybe the name of a TV show, name of a place, maybe even just the way you can refer to someone. One of the main rules of the proper nouns is the fact that they have to be capitalized on the first letter of the name or the place. For example, you usually have to use, when you use the name of a person, you have to capitalize their first name or their given name. This is to make it like it seems official. They are the official name and you cannot change how they are. No matter in which part of the sentence it is, it can be at the end of it, it can be at the start, it has to be always capitalized. For example, with the difference between common and proper names, let's do a sentence. You could say, oh, I like this new TV show. That will be using the common noun of a TV show, since you're not specifying which one you like. But you could say, oh, I like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones will have to start with a capitalized letter at the start of each letter that it has, because it's an official name or an official show that has a pattern that helps it make it like a real specific thing. Other ways that you can specify a noun are the next ones. You can say that a noun is abstract, or you can say that a noun is concrete. When we talk about concrete nouns, We are usually talking about things that we can perceive with our 5 senses. Concrete nouns are the ones that we can touch something, that we can see it, that we can smell it. In the other hand, abstract nouns are the ones that we cannot perceive with our 5 senses. For example, an abstract noun can be an idea or maybe a feeling. You cannot exactly touch or smell love, but you know that it can be a noun, you know that it exists. Another ways to classify nouns, it can be by using the count, mass, the collective nouns, and all of these new classifications that you can find when you're trying to research more about nouns. For example, count mass are the ones that you can count that have a singular and a plural way of writing them. Or the mass nouns are the contrary to the count mass nouns. These are the ones that, since there are a lot of them, you need to use things like gramos, kilos, millimeters, centimeters to find a way to use them in a sentence. For example, collective nouns, in other hands, are the ones that come on a group. Those are the ones that are groups. For example, you can say a pack of wolves, a class, a group. Those are the ones that are considered collective nouns. The way we can join together the idea of the structure of the sandwich with the nouns is making them seem like the bread. They are an important part of the sentence because without the bread on a sandwich, it would just be a mess of things trying to stick together. You cannot hold it, you cannot taste it, you cannot take a bite out of it because you don't have how to handle it. You don't know who is doing the sentence, you don't know what is happening because you don't understand the noun. If you don't have the bread, you are not able to sustain the other things of a sentence. The next one we are going to do are pronouns. Pronouns serve as a replacement of the nouns without making a specific way to do it. You don't have to use a name or a specific name, and instead of that you use a shortened name that could help you identify them even though you're not being specific. One of the pronouns are I, you, he, she, it, you on a plural name, and they. These are just one of the samples of pronouns you can find. These are usually taught when you are in elementary school, so you most likely already know about this. But to put a point to this is that pronouns can be identified as a type of bread. Well, we might already know the type of bread that we're using. You have to specify what type of bread. Do you want white bread? Do you want one of banana bread? You want something specific? You want it to be spicy? You want it to have a certain spice, a certain flavor? Then you need to specify the type of bread. If you don't specify the type of bread, maybe it wouldn't take the same. For example, if you use banana bread on a simple ham sandwich, it would taste weird. It wouldn't have a good taste to it. So you have to be specific and be careful about the pronouns that you use. For example, you could be talking about your neighbor and you might use a different pronoun. But maybe your neighbor is a girl, and if you use he instead of she, that might be misgendering them and the sentence wouldn't have sense. So you have to be careful when you use the pronouns on a different way that you're trying to specify. Adjectives. With adjectives, you have to be more specific about what you want of the thing. You have to specify how it looks, how it tastes, how many it has, the quantity, the quality of it to make it more specific. This can give you a taste. That's why we compare it with the butter. You usually add butter to a bread because you want it to taste different, to have a different flavor. It adds something. For example, that's what you can say. She found a beautiful picture. In this case, the adjective will be beautiful because you're describing how the picture looked, how it was. But maybe in a sentence, you can also say, I have 2 hamsters. In this case, you are using an adjective that is telling you a quantity. It's telling you a certain number that you have. In this case, 2 is the adjective. You can also say a way to describe the thing that you're trying to say. For example, you can also say the bluebird. This helps you specify how it looks. As the same, I found 1 bird in the park. I found a beautiful bird in the park. And this can help you add something to it that makes it more specific so you have a better idea of how it looks. The next one, we're going to talk about adverbs. Verbs are the ones that make an action, an event, or a state. These ones are clarifying what the pronoun or the noun is doing. This can help you have a structure to your sentence. Without a verb, your sentence wouldn't exist. It wouldn't make sense. You need to be doing something. You're telling something, and by that you're using a verb. They are really important to the parts of speech, and also as a noun, they are one of the most easiest but really important parts of it. When it comes to verbs, you can classify them in certain ways. For example, in this case, we can classify them on states of being and actions. When we talk about state of being, we are referring usually to the verbs like am, is, are, was, were, and we can keep going. But these are usually the ones that tell you how you are, how you're feeling, and right now, how you were feeling, how you will be feeling. The action ones, as its name says, are the ones that are telling you that you're doing or you did or you will do an action. For example, you can say, I will play next Saturday football with my friends. Or you can say, I used to dance when I was little. The verbs are the ones that are telling you you're doing an action. In this case, the action will be playing soccer or dancing. We usually have to see them in the sandwich structure as the meat. We are considering the meat because a lot of people consider that a sandwich without any type of meat is not a sandwich. It's a specific part that needs to be in the sandwich. That's also how a sentence needs to have a verb. Without the verb, it wouldn't taste the same, it wouldn't be the same. So that's why we compare it to the meat. That is an essential part to a lot of people when it comes to a typical sandwich. The next part are the adverbs. Adverbs are just like adjectives, but the thing they are describing is different. When it comes to adverbs, you're usually describing how the action is done, while with the adjectives you're describing the noun. As the adverb says, there are different classifications to adverbs. There are adverbs of manner, of time, of place, and of degree. First, when it comes to the adverbs, we have to think them as they are questions. First of all, of manners. You have to ask yourself how. When you think of time, you have to ask yourself when. When you ask yourself the place, you need to ask yourself where. And when you ask yourself the degree, you have to ask yourself how much. The first one of manner is describing how the action is doing. When we talk about the adverbs of manner, we have to ask ourselves how. How is the action being performed? For example, it's different than saying Annie danced, and just like that. While we are not doing a complete sentence, it seems like something is missing. We have to describe how the she danced. It was softly, it was graceful, it was vigorously. In this case, we're going to use that Annie danced gracefully. Maybe she was practicing ballet and she had to do the really graceful and delicate features to make it stand out. In this case, we're already describing how the action was done and we're using the first adverb of manner. The second one is adverbs of time. We have to ask ourselves when. When did it happen? For example, when we talk about adverbs of time, we usually have examples like yesterday I went to eat with my friends. Maybe tomorrow I'll do my homework. In this case, yesterday and tomorrow are marking a time where you are doing something. You're describing when you're going to do it. So you're putting a time on it. That's how you ask yourself the adverbs of time. When we talk about adverbs of place, we have to ask ourselves where. Where was the action performed and how do we describe it like that? For example, you could say, I look everywhere. You're trying to say everywhere as the place you found it, you try to search it. You're using this to describe where you were trying to search, where you were trying to look, where the action was done. The next adverb is of degree. How much? We usually use this without already thinking that they are adverbs. We are talking about, for example, using the example of Miguel. For example, Miguel is a very talented kid. We're using very to describe how the kid is doing. In this case, we can use an adverb, then an adjective, and then a verb. This doesn't break any rules of grammar, since it is grammatically correct. Use this and they can be considered even a rule when we're talking about adverbs. Adverbs are related to the type of meat. While we already have the verbs that are the meat, and we have established that it's needed on the sandwich, we have to ask ourselves now, what type of meat you want? In this case, the adverb is the one that's describing the type of meat. You have to be specific about what you want in your sandwich. And the type of meat can change the flavor of it. It can be different pork from maybe using chicken, maybe using fish. It can change the way it tastes the same way that adverbs can change the way an action is being described. Conjunctions are the part of speech that help us connect different words, phrases, clauses, and sentences between one another. These ones are usually used to find a better flow to a sentence, so it doesn't sound as dry or as badly done as you could use without a conjunction. The most common conjunctions are and, for, so, but, yet, nor. These are the ones that are used to connect different ideas and to make them seem more complete. You can make one sentence out of two sentences even. You can make a connection between two words. Like for example, you can say, so I have 3 hamsters and 2 cats. You can make it so you're connecting how much things you have. You're connecting an idea, you're connecting something that helps you complete the sentence. You're already using a connector, a conjunction, to help you join your ideas. You can just say, I have a lot of fun yesterday, and you can just say, since I stay up late at night, my mom got angry at me. Those two function as two separate sentences, but by connecting them, you are joining them and making it as one, and you are making a history out of it. You're connecting them, and you're making it seem like they are of a joint story. And since you're making a connection between two things or more with this, you can also say that the cheese is the one that connects the parts of the sandwich. You're connecting the meat with the lettuce, and it helps you make it seem like it has a better flavor than it has. You can just eat a sandwich without the cheese, but it will seem like something's missing, that wouldn't have that connection that makes it seem all come together and make it taste better than it is. And since cheese can connect different parts of the sandwich, you can also say that conjunctions are connecting and making a better flow of how it says a sentence. The next part of speech will be the articles. Articles help us specify a certain thing or see if they are not specified and they are just generic. In the English language, there are only 3 articles, this being the, and a. While we change the pronunciation of some of them, for example, we don't say the pronunciation of a vowel, since when you tell it in a sentences, the pronunciation is different. When you try to be specific about something, you use the. When you use the, you're trying to be more specific about the day, the way you do it, and how it went. For example, after the long day, the cup of tea tasted partially good. In this case, we are talking about a specific day, that specific long day, that it passed really slow for this person. And after this, they have a specific cup of tea that they thought they got better, the day got better just by tasting it. This way we're using a specific thing, and we're referring to something that has a time, a place, and a way that it happened. When we talk about on a specific thing, we use this, an and a. For example, in this, it will be after a long day, a cup of tea tastes partially good. In this case, we're not being specific about the day or which cup of tea. We're just saying that after a long day, maybe when you're tired and you did a lot of work, a cup of tea could make you feel better. You're not specifying when or what cup of tea, what special of tea, You're just saying that it could help you get better, but you're not specifying something. Or for example, when we use and, the difference between one and another is that when you're talking about and, we have to check that the next word after that starts with a vowel. When we use, for example, apple, we cannot say apple. That wouldn't sound right. That would sound wrong. That's why we use the an apple. It sounds better and it doesn't cut the flow of the sentence of the word that we're trying to say. On the other hand, we use a when there's not vowels. In this case, for example, you can say a party. I went to a mall. You don't need to add the N since it doesn't start with a vowel and it doesn't cut the flow the same way. While there might be some exceptions to this rule, these are usually the ones that you have to follow when you're trying to use articles. Just like a sandwich is somehow incomplete without mayo, it's the same with complete sentences. There needs to be an article that joins them together so it can taste better. Sometimes a sandwich without mayo doesn't taste the same. It seems like something's missing. That is the same with sentences without articles. The next one is prepositions. With prepositions, you're making a relationship between the noun or pronoun and the other words of the sentences. This way you can make a relationship between them that links them together to make a full sentence that makes current sense. In this case, the result of that is something that we call object of preposition. This is the link between the two, and it's important to know it by name and by how they are used. Some of the prepositions that we can find are above, below, about, after, before, etc. The use of prepositions is mostly consistent of the fact that it helps us link our ideas in a better way. By linking or making a relationship between certain sentence and another phrase, this helps us make our ideas more concrete and help us get what we want to say through with a better understanding of where it is and how do we want to explain it in a certain time or in a certain place. We connect this in the sandwich structure with the lettuce. This helps us have a different consistency when it comes to biting it and eating it. It's a great way to link the flavors with the cheese, the meat, the bread, and the other things that it has and make it seem like it's complete. Sometimes a burger or even a sandwich without lettuce tastes different. There's something missing that crunch that really needs to come out to seem like there's something important. The last part of speech is interjections. Interjections help us convey an emotion to the reader. They are not necessarily or grammatically for a sentence to function, but they help us convey the emotions that we're trying to express through our character or through our sentence. For example, they often are used with an exclamation mark. This helps us convey how excited, how scared, how surprised we are. This helps us put more emotion into one sentence. They are used to convey even more emotion than we have to. For example, we can use oh, maybe young if we're hungry and we like something that we eat. Maybe even like they are not sure that is correct, that they like that. Maybe they can just say wow because they are surprised with the results or something. There's a lot of ways that you can convey interjections, And that's why we relate it to the mustard. A lot of people don't like putting mustards on their burgers or their sandwich, so it's not necessarily to be in the sandwich for some people. But it has something, it has a spicy flavor, it has the different feeling that it gives you. Mustard gives you something else to bite to. It gives you a different taste and a different smell. You can identify that something has mustard because the smell, it has such a specific smell and it helps convey something to it. You already know how it's going to taste. You get to know how it's going to taste in a different way. In the same way that with interjections, you know the emotion that is being conveyed through either the exclamation points, using 3 points at the end, or the way you're trying to say it. Maybe when you're reading a sentence, you are able to understand how to read a sentence or how to read a paragraph. When you see an interjection, you're able to see if the character is feeling happy, if they're feeling sad, if they're feeling hesitant, or if they just are surprised by something. This helps us convey more through our sentence and our writing that it can be without using them. You can totally write like a sentence like, if we want to use an example, we could maybe use a difference between narrating something and using the interjections as a character that is happening there. We can narrate that maybe Maria is eating a cake and she thinks it's really delicious. But it's different than saying that as I'm Maria, that's saying, Johnny, I really like this cake. It conveys different. It seems different to the sentence and to the way you're phrasing it. And that's why the mustard or the interjections put a little spice, a little different taste to it. In the end, we get the conclusion that you get to make your whole sandwich. You get to experiment with all the flavors to decide which bread you want, what type of meat you wanted, if you wanted butter, if you wanted lettuce. But the most important part is that we learn how to do sentences in a right way. How do they work? What are the parts that we need to make a full sentence? This helps us understand the way things work when we try to write something. We don't know the way we do it is not just simply writing something down. It has its different parts that work for something that had a reason to be there, that help us understand better the way the sandwich or the sentence is done. In this case, we were able to make what we believe is a perfect sandwich. And now you're able to make your own sentences while knowing a little more about how they are done.